next session, Scaling Dynamic Compliant Solutions in Pharma Manufacturing, looks at how Eli Lilly and Frontwell Solutions built a flexible digital logbook framework that balances global standardization with local customization, enabling faster builds, streamlined governance, and real-time insights across 17 sites. Joining us are John Clark, IT architect at Eli Lilly, and Julian Wittrock, global technical Tulip lead at Frontwell Solutions, two experts driving scalable, compliant digital systems in a highly regulated environments. Please join me in welcoming John and Julian to the stage.
Wow, okay. Two experts, right? So let's hope that people leave the room as well, knowing that we are experts in this as well, which we really are trying to get to. So thank you so much for the warm welcome. It's brilliant to be back here. I was in operations calling last year, so to be able to come back and present at this amazing conference is really, really good. So my name is John Clark. I work for Eli Lilly, based in the UK. I have been working on the digital transformation journey now for some time, or our continuous improvement, as we work to be moving our paper-based form processes to digital solutions. And Tulip has been, one key enabler of that for us. But we often have this challenge working in a highly regulated industry around, how can we be building these apps quickly, and how can we be getting this out to the shop floor while still maintaining a good validated state and being compliant. And so what we're wanting to talk to all of you about today is how we've created a suite of apps called Dynamic Forms, and Julian's been a key person involved in that, and how we feel that's really going to help us with our rollout of Tulip. Now, I would like this to be a bit interactive, so if there's questions that people have, please stop us, and we can go through and answer those questions, or if there's questions at the end, we can cover that, and we're also around in case you have questions after the session as well. But you've heard of Dynamic Forms, and you've heard of Julian, so I'll hand over to Julian for introductions.
Thanks, John. So again, my name is Julian Wittrock. I'm technical lead at Frontwell for our Tulip projects, and we've been working with Tulip now for the past 4 years, so we got a lot of experience in different projects in non-EBR, but also EBR space. So what I think enables this as well is that we're implementation partner for a variety of other MES and LIMS systems. So that helps us bring the right level of process understanding into our Tulip projects. With Lilly, we've been working for the last 1.5 years now, digitizing mostly logbooks and forms, right? And I'd say we're constantly evolving the project and pushing the limits of Tulip as well. So I think we're in a good state today, where one of the products that emerged out of this is Dynamic Forms. So now what is Dynamic Forms? It is, taking a step back, how did this come up? We were looking at hundreds of different forms in this project, and we knew that building an app per form wouldn't scale eventually, right? Because that was just at one side where we started this journey, and looking at all the sites, we were probably looking at thousands of different forms, right? So even though we have a really good template app for our logbooks established, and a well-established data model, as well as an improved validation strategy, I think it still takes time to build apps, validate them, and get them out into production. So with Dynamic Forms, we took a more table-based approach to app building, where we're just dealing with a subset of these forms. We don't want to tackle hundreds of thousands of forms potentially, right? But we pulled out this common thread of sequential inputs, like sequential order and single inputs. And with this subset of forms, we went into developing this group of apps. And we'll dig deeper what apps we developed. But this app suite is creating, managing, and executing a dynamic number of forms, hence the name. So that's what it really is. And maybe you can elaborate a bit on the scale of the challenge we were facing.
Yeah, so we've been working, like I mentioned, for some time around our digital transformation journey and getting off of paper. And we've been looking into how can we be positioning Tulip in the best way to be fitting within our operations. And we know we've had to pivot sometimes. This is all new technology, new way of working, going against existing processes which are very long and established. And so as a group, and we have a wonderful group, and we've got a couple of the team over here, which is with us today, we've been great in how we can try and be dynamic with a really dynamic solution and pivoting around where we feel the business needs are, learning from areas where maybe it hasn't worked so well. And so where we've been going to is about how can we try and create some standardized apps to fit against standardized business processes. And that's one key thing that we're working on right now. But what we know is around the world and around our manufacturing sites all across the world, there's going to be forms which don't fit into those standardized apps. But they also don't have a they don't have a home in existing applications that we have, but they're still key as part of our digitization journey. We need to harness the data which is sitting within these paper documents, and we need to do that in a way and unlock that value in a way that we can scale with this solution, that we don't end up with one application almost per one form that we then need to keep up to date, right? That we then need to validate, we then need to test, we then need to think about regression testing against LTS upgrades, but position ourselves more into a way of how can we try and really reach the idea of citizen development with Tulip, so putting apps in an end user's hand where they can be building their forms, which are then compliant to our data model that we've been working through and are validated. So with this set of free applications, we validate the free apps, but then we give the power to the business around you can start building a form within that application. But you don't need to worry about how the data is being saved because that's following our business model. So we believe that there is a lot of value that we can be unlocking with these applications.
Sure. So that's taking a glimpse on the categorization process that we did back in March. And I mean, I think it's a good story to tell when we talk about all these digital solutions, because I think some of the people here in the back were also there. So as we were looking at these hundreds of forms, I personally found it extremely difficult to understand like similarities between all of them. So we actually went ahead and printed out hundreds of different forms and laid them all out on the table in front of us. And we used sticky notes to start like categorizing or finding similarities, that some of them are shown here. So we went ahead and we didn't look really at the areas the logbooks or forms came from, but we looked at were they hierarchical, were there decision points in those forms, or for example, how were the inputs structured, right? Was it just purely simple text inputs or checkboxes, right? That I guess most of these forms have, and then other forms had more complex calculations. And then another key differentiator that we looked at was those second-person verifications, trying to eliminate them as much as possible, but we still end up with a bunch of them. So we also looked at which forms were using SPVs. And another piece of this is looking at Tulip's common data model, right? We tried to find which main artifacts each logbook was dealing with, so whether it was dealing with equipment or rooms, materials, and so we clustered them. And some of the clusters you can see here, actually group 1 or subgroup 1A, it's just what we picked back then and the name stuck. But that was, I would say, the simplest subgroup of these apps or of these logbooks. And this is where our initial requirements were driven off from. And so we, like I said in the beginning, we started with looking at very simple forms, still in the dozens at the time, right? So, I don't know, tackling 10%, 15% possibly. And that led to our first requirements and eventually into these 3 apps.
And this is something that we felt worked really well and this was actually on a plant site that we went into a room. The plant had identified key forms to be digitized or moved into, as part of digital transformation journey, to be moved into Tulip. And we went through a process, like Julian mentioned, of printing them all. So I was actually at the printer, like trying to get all of these documents out, and there was a huge stack of them. And it kind of does feel like it goes against what we're trying to do in a way, right, of getting rid of paper, that we just generated a lot of paper. But it really helped with that analysis to have it physically in front of you, that you can start kind of mapping, okay, where are the similarities, and start taking those documents and piling them up in the piles. And there's a little Easter egg right there. There's obviously a group 3 when it says group 2 there. But we were working on trying to group together those forms in a way, and they did start then getting quite complex, right? So we had some forms which were pretty hefty, like some groupings which were pretty hefty, which is good. And then they start getting a little bit more complex, trying to see, how those forms could be grouped together. But this was the key task that we want to take also to the rest of our sites, to encourage the actual printout of the forms, go through and categorize them, and then also get your business subject matter experts to come into the room as well, knowing that the paper that they're using is printed, that they can help go through and answer any questions that they have, about those documents. So it was a real good process that we went through, which then developed the first set of requirements for our dynamic form app suite. And so we both worked on the validation of these apps, so globally validating these 3 applications, and we validated them based on the initial set of requirements that we got through looking at these forms. So we know that some of these forms are going to be very complex, but we also know that we had a big stack of ones which looked to be pretty simple, and those are the requirements we then use to then first create our initial release of the dynamic app suite that we're going to go through next.
Right. Let's start with the first app in sequence. So this is our builder app. The builder app basically allows the end user to set up or create new versions of a form. So basically you enter your ID for your form or the form name, and then from there you can create multiple sections. So, and then each section can contain multiple tasks within that. So you have that hierarchy that is then sequentially being followed on the shop floor. And when you're setting this up, you have then the option to pick from different task types. So you see here on the left which task types we eventually came up with. So for example, simple text inputs or an acknowledge, so just checkbox number inputs, actually coming with limits, so upper and lower limits, also like barcodes and images and all that. So we have these 8 initial task types, and then we're going to talk about new requirements emerging later on that possibly will grow that list of task types that we're dealing with. And so when you're setting up these tasks, you can select between them, and when you're setting up your tasks, you can enrich the screen with text input or instructions, pictures, anything that you want your operator to see on on the runner app then, that I'll get to later. And they can, within this builder app, they can basically toggle on and off a view where they would see how that eventually looks for the end user on the shop floor. So they immediately understand, okay, this is what I want to show. Does it look good? And then finalize that task. And then once they've set up all the sections and tasks, they can send this out for approval. And I think...
Yeah, and just on this builder app, so it's not really very clear to see within the screenshot that we have here, right? But if you just imagine I got a form, I got one section at the top where I got maybe a text box that says, enter in a name. I got a box to enter in a name. In a paper form, I got a box to enter in a date. We can then start taking that and say, okay, that's the first section that we're going to build within the builder app. And we're going to have a date picker for date and time. We're going to have a single select to select an artifact that we could have, which could be a room or a building, etc. So this is how we start building up a form. And so this is just so key to an end user to then have access to this, to say, okay, I got this paper-based form today, it's asking for this bits of information in these 2 sections. I can then start building it through this interactive builder app and then send it through for approval.
Yeah, and really, look at the builder app, really the job is you take the Tulip app, right, on one screen, and on the other screen you take your PDF or your Word file, and you just walk through each section and task, and you should be able to set up the form really easily in the builder app. Yeah, so the next app, our approver app, is basically maintaining statuses of these forms, right? So here, a certain subgroup of users, so QA supervisors have access to this app, and they can see all the different forms in all their versions, and so from here they can select what's the next status going to be, right? So a form sent for approval, they can drill down deeper, they can review again how sections and tasks have been set up, and then either reject it or set it effective, right? When they set it effective, this comes with a full-blown versioning concept. So a former version would be set archived, and this form that was just, or version that was just set effective will then be published to the shop floor. So yeah, they have the full view of all the forms, all of it in here, and yeah, just maintain the different statuses.
And we talked about QA, and so what we found early on within Tulip is around we have certain roles, right, that comes on a platform like operator, application approver, but sometimes we need to be more granular with actions within an application, restricting that down to certain groups. So we've taken advantage of user groups within these applications as well to limit certain actions to certain groups like QA, like Julian mentioned.
Yeah, and then last but not least, we'll get to the end piece of this, which is our runner app. And that is what we assign then to the stations on the shop floor, right? So for the shop floor, this is the only app they want to go to, right? Next to individual apps, but that's the place to go. And from here, they can then select their form or scan the form. So the idea was eventually a site can have dozens of different forms built into this app, right? So we thought of just print out a QR code, attach it to an equipment or a room where this logbook is used, and just scan it in, and then the runner app automatically selects the form that you're going to execute. And so when you're executing the form, this, I would say 90% looks the same as an individual app, right? So there's not so much difference here for the user. So they go in, they have all their functionality that we have included on our template app, so they can create exceptions from here, for example. They can view all the inputs they've done so far and correct possibly inputs. And yeah, so this is all hooked up in the end to the same data model. And I think that's the biggest charm of this, is that I would say just a few weeks before that, we revised our data model, right? And built a global reviewer app. And so this reviewer app, we knew if dynamic forms can feed all the data inputs into that same data model, and it would all connect seamlessly, I think this makes the entrance barrier much lower for this app to be rolled out. And yeah, so coming back to how the operator uses this, they just go through sequentially through all these tasks. In the middle of the screen, this is blank now, but this could show pictures as well. So rich data can be shown here. They have all sorts of instructions then on the top right, and then they have their single inputs in the lower right corner. And so this is doing then the same thing as our individual logbook apps, where it's populating to our existing data model. And then you move through this process sequentially, review the data in the end, and then send this out for our global reviewer app, where QA now has access to all this data in a consolidated way with all the events reported.
I think the data model for us has been key, and that's been something of an evolution as well. Like as we get more experience and more Tulip apps, reviewing the underlying data model, how is that working? Is it still working well? And we've moved away from having sort of individual entry and reviewer apps into having entry apps, and then having one global reviewer app that can then tap into that standardized data model that we've created, which, like Julian said, the beauty of this is the data that's now being recorded through this app suite, through the dynamic runner app, even though it's different in how it's working compared to maybe some of the other applications, the underlying data model is the same. So the way that we can look at data has the same user experience as the other applications that we have. So for this, we really see that we can position this, and our hope is to position these applications to areas where sites have these forms, like I said, that don't fit into our global standardized applications that we've been developing, but still key to be moving these forms over to digital as part of a digital transformation journey. We have also need to be thinking about guardrails, right? So we want to make sure that the forms that are being created are created in a good way. So we have put together an SOP on how to go through and use the applications. And we've also been really clear and upfront around limitations. So this is the first, our first version of this app suite that we wanted to get out, but we are aware that there are certain limitations, and so we've been really clear up front about those within the SOP, where the apps can be used, where they cannot be used for the moment of time. And then this is something that we will going to be evolving. But coming back to my point around this citizen development, right? I think this is one thing that we have been finding quite difficult to grasp in a heavily regulated industry around, like I get it, like get apps out there onto the shop floor and get that benefit out there and quickly do revisions and get the users who have an interest in the task to be involved in building the applications and train them. And I totally get that, but then on the other hand, we got to validate it, because one thing is just to be aware of what is Tulip, right? And I think that's one key learning that we have here is around understanding what Tulip is and what it isn't. And people may be used to certain ways of, okay, I'm saving data, that data needs to be saved in a compliant way. If I need to modify data, I need to have an audit trail to show the modifications that have been made. There's other things that we need to build within applications. And if we just allow end users to build apps, they may not think about all of those things because they think that that's covered. So coming back to citizen development, we have like these two ends of the scale, right? Like the end of citizen development, get apps out there, but then we've also got the other end, which is around validation and everything that comes with that to make sure the apps are in a validated state and that we don't have any issues. But we feel like this is a really good app suite that places us in the middle of that, where we validated the apps, we have a validated data model that's sitting behind this, but the business can then take these applications and start building their forms following their SOPs. So we feel it really helps us get to this idea of citizen development within Tulip.
So right now, just a few more points on the technical side here. So this app is available in the Lilly marketplace, right, for all sites. So we took a pilot site to develop this with, but now that it's validated, it's available, and sites are starting to download this into the dev environments, start to understand the concept and what it can do and cannot do, right? So with SOPs and training materials, like eventually we want sites to become self-sufficient with this, right? We don't want them to, we want their SMEs to be able to build forms again, know how to review this, how to get this live and out there very quickly again. Similar how they did it before, right, on paper. And I guess it follows a similar process again. And then the other piece of this is we're strictly controlling this from a global level. So there's not going to be any localization of this. So any language adaptation we need to do, any enhancement, any issue that we find maybe within the next weeks, months, can be then fixed or done on global level and then pushed out to sites again. So this is really important for us that we maintain this on global level, and because this is all table-based now, right? Any change that we do now on app level is not gonna change anything on the forms that were already developed, right? So we can just push out a new version. Even though we create a new task type, that means for a site maybe, hey, let's revise our form, we want to use that new task type, right? But all the data they've created already is not going to be affected by our new versions. And so I think this could be a key success criteria here for our dynamic forms.
Yeah, and we finished validating this app suite, like Julian said. We pushed it into our production instance, and we made it available through App Exchange. And sites have their own workspaces in dev. We have a separate instance for dev, which is shared, where each manufacturing site will have their own workspace. So they've been actually installing the app suite into their workspace and playing around with these apps. And that's also been good, because that's then starting to uncover certain things, right? Like, as more and more people play around with it. We had one manufacturing site that created over 60 tasks in it. Like, we didn't think we would potentially get that big, but then to be fair, like the SOP, that we did come up with 100 as a limit. So I think a site doing 60, we're near the limit, but then we realized that we reached a limitation with the number of triggers that could execute on the instance. And so we then got the instance updated to allow the number of triggers to go through and run with up to 100 tasks with these forms. So definitely, like, pushing this app to App Exchange, encouraging sites to download and install and start play around with these apps has been really good for them to get to know how this is working. But the way that we are positioning this is that we validated it, it's published in our production instance, and sites can then request that to be published in their own production instance following their change control, with no additional validation that they need to do, unless there is anything specifically they want to take a look at.
Mm-hmm.
So just around some learnings that we've had with this, it's really key around getting people involved early with the development of this. And so we've definitely been in an evolution, I feel, around in the last sort of year and a half with Tulip, in trying to make sure, like I mentioned earlier, that people really understand what Tulip is. So sometimes we have this question of, why doesn't Tulip do this? And it's like, well, it's not that Tulip doesn't do that. It may be that the application that we've built doesn't do that, right? Or we come up with an idea of a run ID, and we have an architecture around run ID, and maybe there's an issue, and it's like, well, why doesn't Tulip do run IDs correctly? And it's like, well, that's something that we've built. So it's been sort of a year and a half, I guess, of sort of educating people as well. And I think that's really key, that people really understand, what is this? And in the AstraZeneca session earlier this morning, there was this discussion about, well, isn't it just like Power Apps? And it really isn't. It's something very different to that. So the key thing that we found with this is obviously involving everyone from an early stage within the development of this, and trying to educate people really, on what Tulip is and what it's not. And I think that's a journey that we are going to continue, and also to be reviewing the team, like who is with you, and how can you get other people to help champion digital transformation, right? So within your manufacturing sites, you're going to have people who are going to want to champion this. You're going to have people who are like, I don't want paper anymore. Like, I'm done with paper. I'm done with lost pieces of paper. I'm there for you. Like, I'm here for it, for digital transformation. How can I help you? And try and get like the sites to be working with you as well as part of your OCM in managing Tulip. But that's been really key for us.
And I think the balancing continues, right? I think the scoping phase was a very important piece of this, where we could have tackled, or we could have tried to tackle 30-40% of all the forms existing, right? But I think it was very good that we started small here. We took, those 10% that I mentioned before to create our first requirements and get this out there to sites and get the experience, how they use it, what they don't use possibly, right? And again, right, it can probably tackle more, and that's what we're seeing now with new requirements. But I think it was really good that we got this out there within 3 months and are now seeing benefits and challenges with this. And then the next enabler for this, I think it was mentioned a couple of times, is the data model consistency here. That no matter what app we're using, this is all like in one data model, and especially the QA colleagues, I think, gained a lot of trust because they knew the existing model of reviewing data, right? And then this being the exact same, right, was very easy for them to grasp. And then it wasn't such a big new concept for them.
Yeah. And does this resonate like with any of you? Like, have any of you got within your areas of work like these small little forms and trying to find a home for them? Does anyone have any examples they want to share, or? It's an open-ended question, right? Or any questions so far on what we've been sharing? Yeah, please.
Talking about scaling, once your app is available on App Exchange, and let's say you release a new version, how do you inform the sites on getting this new version? Do you push it, or do you ask them to pull it from the App Exchange? What's the mechanism you follow for pushing the new versions?
Yeah, I think like version management is something which we're all learning right now. Like, what is the best way to manage that, right? And I think it comes down to what is in the new version that we pushed out. You know, there's some critical updates which sites needs to take down. Like maybe we found an issue with that, and sites then need to take that version down and install it, or is it some new functionality which is not so urgent, but we would want them to upgrade in a certain period of time? And there's a couple of ways I think that we can work around this. So one of them is that we've developed these applications in a way that there is no configuration. So it should just be an overwrite within their production environment, because the underlying table structure will remain the same. But also thinking about version management, I think we need to be thinking about, what does that process look like? Is it always overwriting a new version? Or is it like I have a document that I've created, an electronic document, which lays out, this is the change that needs to be made, and that change is then made directly into environment. So I think the whole version management is something that we're still trying to work out right now. You know, what is the best way to move forwards with that? And I think it'd be really good to see from a Tulip perspective, what does that look like in the future around, I've got an app, I know that's in 20 instances, all being used at version 2, and I've now got a version 3. Is there any way that I can kind of push changes out? And I'd like to see whether there could be an opportunity for Tulip to do some more work within that area.
Yeah. I think the dashboard that we saw this morning, right, showing apps across different instances that you're using might help, right? If you see versions in different workspaces, right, that would help you to identify which sites still need upgrades. But yeah. So.
And then for rollout planning.
Yeah. So we started small here with one pilot site, and now like other sites have downloaded this from the marketplace, mostly to their dev environment. So they start uploading their forms. They understand what this does, and they come up with new requirements for us, right? So we keep maintaining this backlog of requirements across all different sites, and now it's a task for us to evaluate the different requirements coming in, right? So we're looking, for example, at how many forms can this unlock, how many sites are affected, how critical is it maybe, right? There are definitely issues going to be found, and you mentioned one with 100 tasks being populated by a site. So so as we're rating this, we're also having to keep in mind the design principles behind this, right? We don't want to shoot for 80% of all forms at Lilly. I think that would be oversimplifying a lot of processes, right? But I think there is still a big subset of forms that we can tackle here, and so it's balancing again like simple design principles versus sites' needs, and what do we want to keep in our rollout plan. And so, yeah, I think. I don't want to over-engineer this. This is already a very complex app group. But yeah, very, very much looking forward to see what's coming in the next versions and what sites really need.
And it is within its early stages right now, right? So we validated it. These sites are starting to bring it down to dev. There's been a lot of interest with it. And so now we're then working to start getting these apps out into production, but we really do feel that this is going to have a lot of benefit. Of course, there could be issues that could come up that we need to work through, but I feel like it's a very innovative way of working. And I kind of quote, when we first started out with Tulip, we went to one of our brand new plant sites, and that was right at the beginning of our journey with Tulip, and there's still a lot of unknowns. And the site head said to us, this is not replication, this is innovation. And I think we're really happy to be working on something which is innovative. Goodness me, it's hard sometimes, right? It is hard. Things go wrong. There's a lot to think about, a lot of different scenarios that come up. But also to be working on something so innovative, I think is fantastic. Just one other thing that we did do with the rollout planning is that we did also look at creating a playbook. So we created a clickable playbook that we then made available to everyone, which talks through all of the applications, how they work. Julian created some videos as well that we put within that playbook. We used a bit of AI to create some like cool little graphics within there, just to make it a little bit more fun and a bit different. Also talking through limitations that we have there, although we have an SOB behind that, but also then had a text section as well. So whenever this app is being installed in different instances, like we all know there's certain things we need to reconnect when we move applications through instances. So the playbook had a tech section in the back of it just to help with that.
Now all the Lilly sets have to go through my thickest German accent now with all those training videos.
With the training videos, but they've been, the feedback on that is good as well, right? So it's just feeling like there's a lot of innovation with this, a lot of different ways that we can be doing things. So how can we be thinking continuously a little bit more out of the box with this? And that's really what we wanted to share with everyone. I want to thank the collaboration with Julian, and there's been a big team behind us to get with this, like our system owner, our BQA, our custodian, our quality reps. Like there's been a lot of people inputting into this, collaborating, and it's been fantastic. And I think like we're excited and looking forward to the future on what we can do. But with that, I'd like to open up in case if you have questions. Yes.
I don't know if you'll be able to answer this, but almost everybody has like an audit readiness checklist. Is there a new item that went on the audit readiness checklist because of the use of the forms?
I mean, that comes down to inspection readiness in general, right? And having an awareness again of what Tulip is, what's in there. Also thinking about application inventory, right? Like what is your inventory that you're using for your applications, and how can we represent, that was actually something interesting around, like we have an inventory, a CMDB of all of our applications that we have, right? But this is a little bit of a different scenario where we have one app where a site can develop multiple forms, right? So we had to think of a way of creating an inventory, but yeah, there is general inspection readiness.
That is specifically made for this?
In Tulip in general, yeah. Mm-hmm. Good question. Not yet, no. Yeah?
So the forms that you digitized, are you expecting to let those like expire in your document management system, or are they still going to be maintained for some period of time? Like, is this you see this as like a full replacement for that?
Yeah, I mean, the hope is to see a replacement, right? The key thing there that comes down to is around what is the site's BCP with that form in case there is an issue, right? Do they still want to maintain that for a little bit of time? What does that look like? But no, the idea is that the forms, we want to retire the forms and get them into the system, or at least stop them being printed. So we have a integration that manages controlled printing of paper forms. And so a key metric for us is how we can see the volume of that going down versus the records in Tulip going up. So the forms may stay around a little bit of time within a document management system, but the plan is to see the phase out of the prints of those. Yes?
Talking about the amount of record going up, is there a request from the users to utilize that data? Now they can access much quicker than paper-based forms, stockpile paperwork form. Do you get any feedback of use of that data after that form is generated?
Yeah, I mean, that's a key enabler of what we're doing, right? Like if we imagine we have a form and you have to look at this is a very bad example, right? But imagine you have a form and you have to record down a tolerance. You have to review a tolerance. Is it in range, yes or no, right? And you got the number. And then, okay, gradually it's then no, right? But we can't mine that data. We can't look at that data. We can't use predictive analysis to say, okay, how can we use predictive maintenance to get to that data? So the hope is, yes, having all of this within Tulip, having it all within a centralized data model. Our next step is reviewing, okay, how do we then get the data out? We're relatively new with getting our data model in place, and getting our initial set of global standardized apps out, as well as this app set. But the key thing is now going to be, how do we get that data back in, right? How can we look at those metrics? How can we look at process improvement within manufacturing to say, okay, I have a task and it takes 5 minutes. I want that to be more efficient. I've changed it. I now have my Tulip app. Is it 2 minutes? Is there a spike of like 7 minutes, but now it's gone down to 2 minutes as an average? So this is all great data that we can start getting out of Tulip for our transformation. Any other questions?
All right.
Okay, thank you so much for your time.